Robert Redford is more than just a movie star. He's a Hollywood legend, known for his incredible acting, directing, and activism. He's had a long and successful career, with iconic roles in films like Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and The Sting. Redford isn't just known for his talent in front of the camera, though. Over the years he's become a respected filmmaker, an environmentalist, using his platform to speak out about important causes. But on one occasion, Redford found himself in an unexpected situation inside a courtroom. What happened next surprised everyone. It wasn't a scene from one of his movies, it was real life, in the courtroom. A judge decided to mock him, thinking he could get away with it because Redford was just a famous actor. But Redford wasn't about to let anyone underestimate him. With a single sharp response, he turned the tables, leaving everyone in the room stunned. His words were not just clever, they were brilliant. In a moment that felt like a movie, Redford silenced the courtroom with his genius. It was a typical day in the courtroom. The air was thick with tension, as lawyers and clients gathered for the case at hand. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, presided over the room. He had seen his fair share of high-profile cases, but this one was different. Sitting among the lawyers and witnesses was none other than Robert Redford, the legendary actor and filmmaker. Redford wasn't there as a movie star, he was there for a legal matter that required his presence. The judge, seeing Redford in the room, couldn't help but make a few remarks. It was clear from the start that he didn't take the actor seriously. In his eyes, Redford was just another Hollywood figure, out of place in the courtroom. As the proceedings began, the judge threw in a few jabs, trying to make light of Redford's presence. He seemed to think it was funny to mock someone who was used to being in the spotlight, someone who had lived a life full of fame and glamour. While the courtroom watched quietly, the judge couldn't resist a comment about Redford's career, perhaps thinking it would amuse the room. Little did he know, his attempt at humor would be met with a response that would turn everything upside down. Redford, calm and collected, wasn't someone who could be easily rattled, but the judge's mocking tone wasn't something he would just let slide. As the judge continued to make his jabs, it was clear that Redford wasn't fazed. While most people in the courtroom might have felt uncomfortable or nervous under the judge's mocking gaze, Redford remained perfectly still. He didn't flinch, his face showed no sign of anger or frustration, just a calm, measured expression. It was almost as if the judge's comments didn't even register with him. The people in the room, including lawyers and onlookers, couldn't help but notice how calm Redford was. It was surprising because, after all, this wasn't a film set where everything was scripted. This was real life, and Redford was facing a judge who seemed to think he could belittle him with ease. Yet, Redford didn't show any signs of irritation. His posture remained relaxed, and his eyes never wavered. In fact, he seemed almost amused, as if he knew exactly what was coming. While the judge thought his remarks were cutting, the silence in the room grew. The audience was intrigued, watching closely to see how Redford would react. They knew him as the movie star, who was famous for playing tough characters, but this was different. This was a real moment, and Redford's response was yet to come. His unshaken demeanor left the judge and everyone else in the room curious. What would he do next? The tension grew, and the judge continued with his mocking, unaware that his words were only pushing Redford closer to a brilliant retort that would leave everyone stunned. After a few more comments, the judge finally crossed a line. He was convinced that his mocking remarks had gotten under Redford's skin. But what the judge didn't know was that Redford had been waiting for the perfect moment to respond. The tension in the room had reached its peak, and just when everyone thought the judge's comments would go unanswered, Redford spoke. His voice was calm, but every word he said carried weight. Redford didn't yell or lose his temper. Instead, he simply responded with a clever, sharp statement that completely turned the situation on its head. He looked directly at the judge, and in a tone that was both confident and measured, he said, "I've spent most of my life telling stories on screen, but I never thought I'd find myself in one like this." The courtroom fell silent. For a moment no one could speak. Redford's words were not only unexpected but brilliant. He wasn't attacking the judge or getting defensive. Instead, he used his wit and experience as a storyteller to subtly point out the absurdity of the situation. His response wasn't just about showing the judge up, it was a reminder that he was more than just the character people saw on the screen. He was a sharp, intelligent individual who wasn't easily manipulated or mocked. The judge, for a brief moment, didn't know how to respond. Redford had turned the tables completely. The room, which had been tense and uncomfortable just moments earlier, was now filled with a quiet admiration for Redford. It wasn't just that he had shut down the judge with a few words, it was the way he did it. With grace, intelligence, and a sense of humor, Redford showed everyone in the room that he wasn't someone to be underestimated. The judge tried to recover, but it was clear he had been outmatched. The entire courtroom now understood that this was a battle Redford had won, not through anger, but through sheer brilliance. After Redford's response, the room was completely still. It was as if time had frozen. No one in the courtroom dared to speak. Even the judge seemed caught off guard. His attempt to mock Redford had backfired in a way he hadn't expected. The words Redford had said weren't just clever, they had a weight to them that left the judge speechless. The atmosphere was thick with surprise. The audience, which had been quiet before, now seemed to lean in. Some people couldn't hide their admiration. A few even exchanged glances, impressed by how Redford had handled the situation. His calm demeanor, mixed with his genius response, had left them in awe. The tension that had filled the room moments earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet respect for the man who had just shown everyone what it meant to stay composed and clever under pressure. The judge, realizing he had no comeback, looked around for a moment. He cleared his throat, perhaps hoping the room would return to its previous state, but it didn't. No one seemed to be able to shake the feeling that something important had just happened. Redford had used his intelligence to silence the courtroom, not with anger or insults, but with a sharp, well-placed remark that revealed the judge's attempt at mockery for what it truly was, an attempt to belittle someone who was far beyond his reach. The judge stammered, trying to regain control, but it was clear that the courtroom had already shifted in Redford's favor. Even the lawyers present seemed unsure of what to say next. The entire situation had taken a turn no one had anticipated. Redford, without raising his voice, had shown the judge and everyone else in the room just how powerful words could be. His calmness was a sign of his control, and his wit was a reminder that he wasn't just a Hollywood star, he was a force to be reckoned with. For a few moments, the only sound in the room was the judge's papers shuffling. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The reaction in the courtroom, after Redford's genius response, was nothing short of electric. It wasn't just that the judge had been put in his place. It was the way Redford had handled the situation, so effortlessly, so calmly, that left a lasting impact on everyone present. As the silence stretched on, people in the room couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. This wasn't a celebrity getting upset or losing his temper, this was an intelligent individual showing the power of composure and wit. The lawyers in the room exchanged nervous glances. Some of them looked like they were struggling to process the situation. Redford, a man they knew as a legendary actor, had just turned a moment of tension into one of quiet brilliance. They had expected the actor to become defensive or angry, but instead he had shown them all something far more valuable: his ability to handle pressure with intelligence. Reporters who were present at the trial quickly took note of the incident. It wasn't just a random courtroom moment. It was something people would be talking about for weeks. The story of how Redford had silenced the judge spread quickly, and soon it was all anyone could talk about. The news outlets covered the story, not just as a courtroom drama, but as a moment that revealed Redford's true character. He wasn't just a man of fame, he was a man of substance, someone who could hold his own in any situation. The judge, meanwhile, was left trying to regain his composure, but it was obvious that Redford had won this battle without even breaking a sweat. His response had been so sharp that it left no room for the judge to recover his dignity. In the days that followed, the judge's comments were seen in a different light. What had been a moment of attempted mockery now looked more like a foolish mistake on his part. And for Redford, the moment only added to his legendary status. People saw him not just as a star, but as a smart, quick-witted man who knew how to handle even the most difficult situations. Redford's response in that courtroom wasn't just a moment of quick thinking, it was a perfect example of his intelligence and wit. For many, he was already a well-respected figure because of his work in film and his activism, but this event revealed a side of him that many didn't often see. It wasn't just about being a Hollywood icon or a famous face, it was about the depth of his character. Throughout his career, Redford had built a reputation not only for his acting but for his ability to understand complex issues. He wasn't just a pretty face on the big screen, he had been an outspoken advocate for environmental causes and political change long before it was fashionable for celebrities to do so. His response in the courtroom was just another example of this. It wasn't about proving he was smarter than anyone else, it was about showing that he didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene to stand his ground. In fact, Redford's calmness in the face of mockery spoke volumes about his personal strength. He didn't need to engage in childish banter or become defensive. His quiet confidence, combined with his ability to craft the perfect response, was a reminder that sometimes, the smartest people are the ones who don't need to say much. They say the right thing at the right time, and when Redford spoke, everyone knew it. The moment in the courtroom added another layer to the way people saw Redford. He was no longer just the actor who starred in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or The Sting. He was a man of substance, someone who had the ability to handle pressure, who knew how to use his intelligence in any situation. Redford's career had already proved that he wasn't just an actor, he was a storyteller, a leader, and a man who wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in. But in that courtroom, his true power was revealed. His words became a reflection of the depth and complexity that had always existed within him, but that the world hadn't always had the chance to see. The impact of that moment didn't just stay within the four walls of the courtroom. It rippled outward, spreading like wildfire through the media and into the hearts of everyone who heard the story. News outlets picked it up, and soon it was everywhere: headlines, talk shows, and even casual conversations. People couldn't stop talking about what had happened. It wasn't just a story about a celebrity in court, it was a story about dignity, intelligence, and the quiet strength of a man who refused to be belittled. For many, it was a wake-up call. Robert Redford wasn't just the charming actor they had seen in movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or The Sting. He wasn't just the face of Hollywood glamour or the director of thought-provoking films. He was someone who in real life carried himself with the same grace and poise he displayed on screen. People began to see him differently. They realized that his career wasn't just about the roles he played, it was about the way he lived his life. It was about how he faced challenges, not with anger or arrogance, but with calmness and a sharp mind. The story resonated deeply because it wasn't just about Redford, it was about something bigger. It was a reminder that fame and talent aren't enough to define a person. What truly matters is how you handle the moments that test you, the moments when you're pushed, mocked, or underestimated. Redford's response in that courtroom wasn't just a clever comeback, it was a lesson in character. It showed that true strength isn't about loud words or grand gestures, it's about staying composed, thinking clearly, and standing your ground with quiet confidence. People who had admired Redford for his movies now found themselves admiring him for something even more meaningful. They saw him not just as an actor, but as a man who could navigate real-life challenges with the same skill and grace he brought to his roles. His intelligence and wit weren't just tools for his craft, they were part of who he was. And in that courtroom, he had shown the world that he was more than just a Hollywood legend. He was someone who could rise above pettiness and prove his worth without ever raising his voice. The story became a talking point for weeks. Friends shared it over coffee, co-workers discussed it during lunch breaks, and fans brought it up in interviews. It wasn't just a celebrity anecdote, it was a moment that inspired people. It made them think about their own lives and how they handled adversity. Redford's calm, measured response became a symbol of how to face challenges with dignity and intelligence. And so while many had always admired Robert Redford for his talent on screen, this moment added a new layer to their respect for him. They didn't just see him as a movie star anymore, they saw him as a man of substance, someone who could handle the pressures of fame, the challenges of life, and even the mocking words of a judge with unwavering grace. It was a reminder that true admiration isn't just about what someone achieves, but about how they carry themselves through the ups and downs of life. In the end, that moment in the courtroom didn't just define Redford's character, it redefined how the world saw him. It wasn't just about the roles he played, or the films he directed, it was about the quiet strength, the sharp mind, and the unshakable dignity that made him who he was. And for that, people admired him even more.